here it is! Another year passed, another best films of the year list. I know over the last couple of years when I make these type of videos, I always start off by making these sweeping generalizations about how film as a medium got better or worse. I'm always like, this year was really productive in propelling both thoughtful indie flicks as well as big tentpole blockbusters, and that's why I believe things are getting better. Which I think is really reductive considering how many movies come out every single year, and I only watch less than 1% of them, so I don't really think it's my place to sum up an entire year of movies into one oversimplified sentence. But what I can do is speak on how the films I did end up seeing affected me personally, so that's what I'm gonna do here today. As always, there are so many movies I wish I got to see, but unfortunately couldn't get access to them, or I simply didn't have the time. Here's just a few of them. Anyway, let's dive into my top 15 favorite films of 2024. Just to remind everyone, these are my favorites, not necessarily the best, technically speaking. So while there are films like Queer and Kinds of Kindness, films I very much admired, they didn't really resonate with me personally. So these are the movies that really said something to me and spoke to me in a specific way. Let's jump into some honorable mentions. Anna Kendrick's directorial debut, Woman of the Hour, was a remarkable freshman feature that contains some really nail-biting sequences, especially this one scene in a parking lot that I have not been able to get out of my head. The Bike Riders was one of those traditional mid-budget movies that the they don't make them like they used to crowd would have adored if anyone actually went out to watch it. An absolute blast and contained some of the goofiest accents I was blessed to witness in a cinema all year. Speaking of they don't make them like they used to, we have Snack Shack, a love letter to the 90s and the director's hometown without the overindulgence of nostalgia. A really charming, raunchy throwback that left me with a massive grin on my face. Bertrand Bonello's The Beast left me dumbfounded. In all honesty, I'm probably gonna have to rewatch this a couple times to really process the whole experience. A very overwhelming examination of how love transcends time and comprehension, all expressed through some of the most lush cinematography I saw in 2024, as well as one of my favorite performances of the year in Léa Seydoux. What a talent. I feel like I'm losing my mind due to how much I genuinely enjoyed both Gladiator 2 and Alien Romulus. Both of these movies had their problems, I'm not going to deny that, but at the same time, I had such a blast with these movies, and their traditional kind of throwback approaches was really refreshing. I know a lot of people are not swooning over this one like I did, but I thought Saturday Night was a blast. With its frantic, bustling energy and ensemble of very exciting young actors, if I'm being honest, this may have my favorite cast of the year. I found this to be an enthralling and amusing look at the creative process. Dee Dee was one of the most intentionally cringe-inducing films about adolescence I've seen in a while. On the topic of coming-of-age films, we have My Old Ass, one of the most overlooked films of the year. It captured this specific kind of lonely nostalgia while sitting in these final moments before entering adulthood. This really feels like you're saying goodbye to an old friend and leaving behind an empty room that was once full of life and laughter, but you know you have exciting things in front of you. I was not expecting to cry during this, but it really got to me. Twisters was a great summer popcorn flick and proved to me that Glenn Powell is simply that guy. Thelma, one of the best comedies of the year. Will and Harper was one of the most insightful and uplifting docs I've seen in a while, and I genuinely think it has the power to change minds and save lives. Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, was another doc that really inspired me and also made me tear up quite a bit. I think this goes without saying, but I really dug Nosferatu. I love seeing Eggers going in bigger and bolder directions, and this film is a testament to his craftsmanship. Just an epic, brooding work of art that left me in awe. The Order was a very distressing and timely piece about how hate infects and permeates in American communities, on top of being a very gripping detective flick. I'm gonna be honest, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Wicked really grew on me once I got over its dull aesthetic and bloated runtime. I think despite John Chu's best efforts to make this an abysmal mess, there was too much talent on screen that it ultimately came together for me. This is coming from someone that's never read the book or seen the original musical prior to viewing this film. This was my first time experiencing this story and hearing these songs, and I thought it was all excellent. It was so good. I thought the casting was perfect. Ariana Grande especially blew me away. I don't know. I'm just a sucker for musicals, I guess. I haven't been able to stop thinking about Clint Eastwood's Juror Number 2, an esteemed filmmaker not just examining, but questioning a system he's very much benefited from throughout his very prodigious career. I was immediately intrigued by its central conflict, but the way the film explores all of the nuances of that conflict is what really got my mind racing. Like many others, I was astonished by the substance. Such a bold, assertive, singular work of art that was delightfully unsubtle in every conceivable way. What a bizarre little movie. Nothing has baffled me more this year than Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's self-funded passion project. It's the film equivalent of your 80-year-old grandpa smoking a bunch of weed and then just rambling about a dream he had 30 years ago. It's so bombastic and messy and risible, but also deeply earnest and contains some very evocative images that have stuck with me since seeing it in a half-seated IMAX theater. I have so many mixed feelings on this movie, but I don't know, seeing this massive ludicrous idea that clearly came from one weirdo's head actually get made was weirdly inspiring. And finally, Love Lies Bleeding, an electric, sexy, relentless firecracker of a film that I wish I could watch unfold for the first time again. Seeing this in the cinema at 10 p.m. on a Friday night is an experience I wish I could relive. Oh yeah, there's one more movie that I want to mention. Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1. Not because I liked the movie. I didn't really, but because I just respect the balls that Costner had to just go for it, I just have a lot of respect for it, and I want to see Chapter 2. I want to see where this goes. Come on, Zaslav, just make it happen. Yeah, anyway. Art is such a gift, and I don't think any film I saw this year communicated that more than La Chimera, a story about a broken, embittered man grieving the loss of his lover through his exploration of tombs, making sense of his current reality by holding ancient objects that have been crafted by human hands, centuries-old history in the palm of his hand, the past and the present converging, revealing all walks of life in a very mythical way and tapping into something almost spiritual. The direction from Elishe Rovakar is so odd, yet succinct. The occasional dips into that dreamy, liquefied aesthetic completely worked in its given context and gave everything a much more ethereal feel. It's both tonally and stylistically arbitrary, but so self-assured in its approach that it all felt deliberate and really coalesced as a piece for me. Josh O'Connor probably gives my favorite performance of the year as Arthur, this vexation and bottled up anger boiling under his very distinct face. He just has one of those faces, man. He looks like he's plucked straight out of a Sergio Leone movie. So expressive and vulnerable. There's a love in his eyes that is felt, but you can tell that a lot of that has dwindled since. I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but it's kind of the performance of a lifetime. Also, one of the most gorgeously shot movies of the year. That blend of both 35mm and 16mm gave everything this raw texture, which allowed the film's fervency to just leap off the screen. La Chimera is so special. Every once in a while, a movie comes along that feels like it was completely devised from one person's mind. A burst of creativity that is evenly plastered on screen, turning specific sensory feelings and life experiences into moving images. This year, that film for me was Julio Torres' Problemista. This film is genuinely some of the most inspiring art I've ever seen. It follows Alejandro, an aspiring toy designer, as he pursues the American dream, discovering the pitfalls of the immigration process and how his interactions with the eccentric Elizabeth, played by the brilliant Tilda Swinton, aid him in navigating through these hindrances. It's so quirky and inventive, but it's never excessive or overstating too much where it numbs the humanity. At its core, Problemista is a film about how love triumphs over conformity. How when you have people in your corner that can assist you into coming into your own and standing out despite how much the system relies on your obedience. All of these ideas are communicated so vividly and with a really acute sense of humor. It extracts the vehement emotions from ordinary life and appropriately enlivens them. It's one of the most uplifting films I've seen in a long time. On paper, Conclave doesn't really sound like my thing. 2 hours of cardinals voting for a new pope. Like what are we doing here? I thought this would be more in line with a film like Joe Wright's Darkest Hour from a few years ago. A stuffy, drab, dialogue-driven snooze fest that Academy voters would eat up. But Conclave is not that at all. This has the pacing and momentum of like an espionage thriller. With its incendiary score, tight screenplay, and top-notch performances, it gives the entire experience a sense of urgency. Lies, deception, information percolating, revealing the flaws of the system by examining the sins of the men that govern said system. It's a brilliant and thoroughly entertaining dismantling of power and how the line between internal faith and selfish political intention is blurred. Seeing these petty, self-aggrandizing men play dice with one of the biggest and most powerful institutions in the world was so diverting to me. It's also one of the most captivating meditations on faith that I've seen in a while. Like, the cynical part of my brain wants to see religious corruption on screen because I just crave conflict like that. But another part of me knows that if this film's intention was to reveal how broken this organization is, it would be depressingly reductive and surface level. The vulnerability displayed in our lead character, Cardinal Lawrence, is what I was personally very drawn to. A man drowning in the egotism of his comrades, doubting his faith in the process. Feeling this sense of alienation from a belief system he once held very close to his chest. A belief in devotion to God getting lost in political hostility. Seeing this level of sensitivity and unbridled humanity from a very important figure was what, like, ultimately stuck with me. Conclave is a riveting exploration of how faith can still exist within the confines of our own shortcomings, and how systems and governments we deem as important are just as confused and flawed as we are, and how coming to terms with that fact can actually strengthen one's faith. I just think it's really cool, especially since I no longer consider myself a religious person. I still find these concepts very compelling. I think it's so rad that George Miller is pushing 80 and he's still making these insane post-apocalyptic epics. The Mad Max universe is so vast and populated, but Miller is always finding compelling ways to expand the landscape. He finds these little pockets, these corners in his already established world, and is able to concoct these rousing narratives from them. Furiosa may just be the gnarliest and most badass example of that. Now that he got all of his wiggles out with Fury Road, he was able to slow down and breathe with this one. This has the same level of craftsmanship in its many stimulating action sequences as Fury Road, but it's paced more like a slow burn revenge western rather than the excessive hyperactive energy of that previous film. I've seen a million revenge flicks that have gotten me really pumped, but the vibes of this movie are so much more ruminative and absorbing. It gives itself time to breathe so it can really put you in the shoes of the lead character without relying on heavy exposition. The fact that this is a saga taking place over many years gives everything this almost biblical weight. Like, the motivations for the character are clearly defined, but it treats every moment with so much significance that it provides an extra layer of depth. You really feel this sense of dread looming over everything. Like, it's so tangible. The journey is so exhilarating and also quietly despondent. We all know it won't give our character what she lost back, but we as the audience still crave the satisfaction of violence. That's why I thought the confrontation between Furiosa and Dementis near the end of the movie was so powerful.
And we need more, and each time we need more until too much is never enough. We are the already dead, little D.
Hemsworth's read of the line,
"Do you have it in you to make it epic?"
has been forever etched into my memory. It really elevates a subgenre of movies we've seen time and time again. This is my favorite Mad Max movie. This one was slipping under a lot of people's radars for a while there, but thankfully it's been recognized here and there throughout this award season, especially Sebastian Stan, who has been properly rewarded for one of my favorite performances of the year. He effortlessly folds into himself, always looking as if he's trying to escape his own body in nearly every scene. This like facial deliriousness that is very helpful in communicating how the character's actions are informed throughout the film. All three of the leads are fantastic for that matter. Adam Pearson specifically was such a delight. Some truly delicious line deliveries from that man. A Different Man is such a strange movie, even if it is seemingly straightforward from a narrative point of view. An aspiring actor with a facial disfigurement undergoes a procedure that heavily changes his appearance, but his life doesn't change the way he imagined it would. Pretty simple logline, but the thematic tissue couldn't be further from that. I love how completely subjective this movie is. You're just thrown right into Edward's world, enveloped in his self-doubt, experiencing his struggles, his awkwardness, his pain, and at a certain point, you realize that maybe his appearance wasn't what initially kept him isolated. Perhaps there is something deeper in his being that drove others away. That's where his jealousy augments and drives him to a place of chaos. The way this film tackles ethicality in art, how individuals with facial disfigurements are treated in media and in society, as well as how jealousy and obsession can be derived from a lack of comfortability with one's own identity, was also odd and anomalous, but I really dug what it was going for. Each passing scene got increasingly more absurd and humorously dark, which made A Different Man one of the most noteworthy films I saw this year. Speaking of Sebastian Stan, if you had told me a year ago that the Donald Trump biopic would be in my top 10 of the year, I would not have believed you. When this movie was first announced, I thought it sounded like a Herculean task that would have resulted in disaster at best. From the initial baffling on-set photos to the festival reactions, I had a feeling it was going to be like a dollar store Adam McKay political satire, but what I got instead was an incredibly morose inspection of capitalist America. The trailers really misinformed everyone on what the tone for this movie was going to be, because because this was really bleak. I've always thought Donald Trump was an interesting subject for a feature film, but it's a really slippery slope. You don't want to humanize the guy to an extent where you feel yourself rationalizing his impact, but you also don't want him to turn into a caricature either. Trump himself is already kind of a joke of his own creation, but you know what I mean. My main thought going into this was, I already know this man sucks, like why would I need a movie to tell me that? That's honestly how I felt for like the first 30 minutes or so, but once I understood what it was shooting for, I found myself quite affected by it. It left me with a really perturbed feeling, a feeling of just how miserable it is that the system that governs our livelihood is kind of a sham, about how the people up there don't really care about anything. These shells of humans lurking in the shadows of the working class. It's a realization that is distressing beyond comprehension. What this movie attempts to explore is where wickedness comes from. The Apprentice really surprised me in how it was able to walk that fine line between humanization and scrutiny. Like, we never see him as like a normal dude, because he never was, but we see him vulnerable. This moment, where we briefly see Donald grieve, contains some of the best acting I have ever seen.
You don't need to.
I'm fine. Don't fucking come near me.
His humanity being met with anger, responding to his own pain with disgust. That's probably the only scene we get to see where like Trump feels like a human being for once. Like, that's just that one scene. The Apprentice also doesn't conclude with this feeling of despair in the traditional sense, like in the Citizen Kane or Godfather 2 kind of way. You know, powerful man gains everything, but at what cost? Instead, it ends with a winner. Standing above a populated city. He owns that city. He owns that nation. He owns that world. He owns you. It's really bleak. It contextualizes our current reality, and that's a terrifying thing. Yeah, it really got to me. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Jeremy Strong is giving the performance of a lifetime here. That moment with the candles at the end, just beautiful work. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a trap head. One of my favorite things about M. Night Shyamalan is just how pure his films feel from a conceptual level. Trap seems like an idea I would have had in like middle school. Serial killer trapped in concert has to find way out of concert. It's an elementary idea, but Shyamalan allows the idea to blossom in a way that is so entertaining. I don't care about plot holes or real world logic. If it works for the world that's created, I have no issue with it. Trap can be so banana brained at times, and that's precisely where I think it excels as a campy Hitchcockian thriller. All of the characters speak with the typical goofy Shyamalan vocabulary and cadence, but in all honesty, this movie would not work without Josh Hartnett. His performance really brings this thing to a whole new level.
I just needed some air. There was an accident in the kitchen. I freaked out. A friend got burned.
Everything about his general demeanor is so off and unnatural. It was delectable, it was succulent. He understands the tone. He plays it completely straight, which really helps in the third act where it requires a lot more external dramatic acting.
I feel out of control.
I know a lot of people's issues with Trap lie in the final stretch where they actually leave the concert, but in my opinion, some of the film's strongest moments are in that third act. It's where the themes really come together. After all, this movie is, at its core, about fatherhood, about balancing work and family, and what happens when that appearance of an idealized family unit is threatened, about being a girl dad and facing the fear of losing that relationship.
There's a window in a nearby tree. Never looked at this place through that lens. Never let the two lives touch.
I think the fact that Shyamalan decided to cast his own daughter in the film, in a very prominent role I might add, is so awesome. There's always been a theme of family running throughout his entire career, so it makes sense, but it's still really cool that he chose to go this route with an ultimately silly concept. This is by all means a B movie with A ideas, and for that I really dug Trap. This movie rocks.
1, 2, compress, repress.
Challengers has such an addicting quality that really scratched my brain. The way it lures you in with its nimble camera work and pulsating score instantly cemented this film as a pop culture staple. While it wasn't like the steamy threesome tennis movie that the trailers led us to believe, what we got instead was a really intoxicating delineation of three extremely layered individuals taking turns stabbing each other in the back. Tashi, Art, and Patrick are all so toxic and wrong for each other, but at the same time, that toxicity is what brings them together in a strange way. All three of them are awful in their own way, which keeps the dynamics extra spicy. Like, who are you rooting for? Who do you feel bad for? Tashi is terrifying but deeply tragic, while Patrick is a douchebag but also kind of a sweetheart, and Art is pathetic but also kind of a horrible friend and a narcissist. Like, who am I supposed to like? What is happening? That's a testament to really strong character writing. The tension in these relationships is what really heightened the eroticism overall. There aren't any actual sex scenes in the movie, rather than many back and forth arguments meant to mimic the energy of a tennis match. The human drama at the center of this is what really keeps you on your toes. Not to say that tennis sequences aren't some of the most invigorating I witnessed all year, because they are. Those final 20 minutes had me leaning forward in my seat. When this happened, I just about lost in the theater. Just brilliant setup and payoff. I remember walking out of the cinema and feeling so pumped that I immediately put on my earbuds and played the score on full blast just to keep the energy alive. I did not want this to end. In the last couple of years, we've heard a lot of discussion surrounding mental health, especially men's mental health. How self-expression and finding new ways to decompress and navigate one's own feelings can result in more emotionally mature individuals. Sing Sing is one of the better depictions of positive mental health that I've seen on film in a while. A story about incarcerated men embracing their fervor through performing, using art as a way to take control of their deepest feelings and feed it through characters, inhabiting another while discovering more about themselves in the process. This film explores how art can connect people, how channeling their very real feelings and experiences into make-believe scenarios can assist in coming to terms with their identity, and as a result, gain insight and knowledge and better themselves as people. It breaks down this male archetype perpetuated in media for decades and sees these men for who they truly are. This movie proved to me that Colman Domingo is one of the greatest actors alive. This man has such a presence, such a voice. He's the glue that holds this together. But I don't want to discredit the rest of the ensemble here. What makes Sing Sing special is it tells a story about incarcerated men finding joy through acting, all played by formerly incarcerated men who went through this same program, taking the skills they developed in that program and applying them to this specific tale. And that is so cool to me. This movie is about healing from the wounds of life and finding solace in art, and it left me feeling truly inspired. I'm really surprised more people aren't talking about this movie. I mean, to be fair, I hadn't even heard of this until I watched a 24 Frames of Nick video of all things. He highlighted a few overlooked 2024 movies, and National Anthem's logline specifically really intrigued me. This film follows Dylan, a young construction worker living with his mother and younger brother, trying to make ends meet and, trying to make sense of his place in the world. But his world changes when he meets a community of queer rodeo performers, and through his many interactions with these individuals, rediscovers who he is and finds love and acceptance along the way. My favorite thing about National Anthem is how it instantly destigmatizes queer culture. Despite taking place in a stereotypically right-leaning side of the country, for lack of a better term, the film is not concerned with pushback or fighting bigotry. Instead, these characters and this lifestyle is completely embraced. There's not a scene where some old fart is yelling at one of the trans characters or calling them slurs or anything. Any conflict within the film comes completely from within these social circles. Arguments between characters, familial tension, love triangles, that sort of thing. I cannot begin to express how refreshing that is. We live in a climate that is causing countless queer people to demand to be treated as human beings, and that's so sad to me. Like, why is this something people are still fixated on? Can we get over this hurdle and just accept people? You know, it's not that crazy of a concept. The beauty of National Anthem is how it normalizes this culture. No one in this movie is demanding equality. They're just chilling. It's great. This movie just made me feel at peace. It made me appreciate how beautiful this country can be. Not just the love exhibited within these communities, but the mountains, the plains, the animals, just the nature in general. This film just lets you sit back and spend time with these delightful characters. It feels like one big hug. Now that I think about it, I saw a lot of myself in the main character. Somebody that is very shy and introverted. Somebody that feels lost. Like, I don't know where I am in my life. I don't know. I don't know where I fit in all this. You know what I mean? And I related to that a lot. I remember when this dropped on Netflix back in June, and I was like hopping up and down. I was so excited. I've been a fan of Richard Linklater for years, so obviously I was ecstatic to see this for the first time, but with the exception of like School of Rock, I haven't really seen any of Linklater's straight up comedies, so I didn't really know what to expect from this, and I came out of this so giddy, guys. This is a perfect blend of Linklater's classic existential rambling kind of dialogue and Glenn Powell's natural movie star charisma. Glenn Powell is quickly becoming one of my favorite white guys. He just oozes with sex appeal, and he's so funny. Him and Audrey Arjona are like two of the hottest people I've ever seen. It's ridiculous. Their chemistry is off the charts. This is the best rom-com of the decade, I'm not even kidding. Despite how silly and pulpy it is, the pacing was a lot more lax than I was expecting. I mean, this is a Linklater joint, so duh. I guess I was expecting something much quippier, but I'm glad that's not what this was. I really love the Linklater-y ramblings and simple human observations made by different characters throughout the film. Hitman delves into like a lot of ideas about identity and embracing parts of ourselves we didn't know we had, turning into this kind of like male fantasy becoming a reality and experiencing the elation as well as suffering the consequences of that. And all of it was just so breezy to watch. I'm gonna be rewatching this at least once a year. It's so delightful, you guys. I love Hitman so much. So the reason I started writing this video later than I expected was because I wanted to watch this movie first. I finally saw it the other night, and I must say, it was worth the wait, like 100%. This is everything everyone said it was gonna be. I was very fortunate to see this absolute beast on 70mm, and I have to say, the projection was gorgeous. This is a traditional cinematic epic with a capital E. It feels like a modern Lawrence of Arabia or Once Upon a Time in America. Like, it just has this timeless quality, and I owe so much of that to the look of the film and also the direction by Brady Corbet. My mouth was hanging open for at least the first 10 minutes. Hearing Daniel Blumberg's booming percussion kick in and seeing the Statue of Liberty come into frame had me locked in. I was so invested in this movie, you have no idea. This film is 3.5 hours long and similar to Killers of the Flower Moon last year. I thought it could have been longer, honestly. I barely felt the length due to just how much it packs in there. You are covering decades of material and character evolution over the course of the picture that it ultimately feels like a very filling cinematic meal. It's so dense, so meaty, so assiduous. It's this loud, epic, colossal film that is still willing to take its time and examine these characters. The first half is honestly flawless, in my opinion, but the second half, while definitely more risky and bold and will definitely turn some people off, left me with far more to mull over, and I was so intrigued by it. This descent into dark tunnels, windowless rooms, and headlight illuminated roads in the dead of night got me feeling more and more queasy. The American dream turned rotten. Just this like hellish, despairing void of nothing. Weirdly enough, it reminded me of The Zone of Interest from last year. I saw Brady Corbet's last movie, Vox Lux, for the first time a few months ago, and was really struck by his ambition, his unrelenting approach to telling a deeply human story on a grand scale. He really honed in on that movie's strengths and carried it over here and sustained that level of confidence through the full 215 minutes. He's a fascinating filmmaker, and I really hope with this movie being brought to the spotlight during this award season that it will give him many more opportunities to operate on this big of a scale. The Brutalist is a stone cold masterpiece. I am obsessed with it. I started watching Sean Baker's films this year, actually, and while this is definitely not my favorite of his work, it's definitely the one I feel like I'll be revisiting the most. Anora is about a lot of things. It's a film about sex work, a film about class struggle. Most importantly, it's a film about the tragedy of conditional love, how the pretense of money equating to genuine connection is very dangerous and will ultimately lead to heartbreak. I read Annie as a person who once dreamed of a fairy tale love story, but as she aged, became more jaded and let that dream die with her. But once she meets Vanya, she thinks that dream can be rejuvenated. She lets that dream have a second life. And as we come to realize the reality of her situation, we experience that denial with her. This is the quintessential anti-rom-com, seducing you with a cutesy, tender, free-spirited relationship just to hit you with a tragic, albeit hysterical, reality that this relationship is not what you thought it was. Just holding on to that dream of romance just to realize it never existed. It is so tragic. This is one of the best films I've seen that effortlessly exercises dips into comedy during very stressful sequences. This film is so funny, but while you're laughing, you feel that love dwindle in your heart. It's like slowly cracking. You feel yourself just like slowly dying throughout the film, feeling this like real-time betrayal that Annie is experiencing, with a whole lot of screaming matches and glass shattering. What really gripped me here was just how far social etiquette and pleasantries were pushed, how much people could scream over each other over and over and over again before a conclusion was ever reached. Something about seeing this like unbridled anger and contention on screen like that really hit hard. There was something deeply sad about seeing argument never really reaching an endpoint like that. Power dynamics always shifting, but no one triumphs. Annie is such a strong spirit and never wants to lose control of a room, yet the world around her is relentless and unforgiving. You rarely see her let her guard down, which makes the film's final minutes so much more despondent and deeply vulnerable to me. All of Baker's movies usually end with this like crescendo of heads butting and emotions erupting, but what makes Anora stand out is how it chooses to conclude with a decrescendo. It's finally taking a breather. It's processing all of the stress and the anguish that we witnessed over the last 90 minutes or so. It feels like Baker at his most like raw and reflective, and at the same time, it's easily his most accessible film to date. It's great. The social and physical alienation presented in I Saw the TV Glow is unmatched. I've never felt a stronger presence of pure vacantness quite like this before. Jane Schoenbrunn has been candidly open about their personal experiences metaphorically manifested on screen. Their experience as a trans person in a world that is relentlessly apathetic and often resentful towards those needs is communicated so vividly here. This feeling of like alienation from yourself, being disconnected from your own body, from your own mind. It's very effectively communicated. I felt a strong connection to the text, being the beclouding of reality and escapism, and just kind of like feeling that loss of identity from that angle. So I cannot even begin to imagine how the subtext resonate with those who have experienced that kind of physical alienation Schoenbrunn so passionately delineates. This was so desolate, just like pure nightmare fuel. My heart shredded in a way that caused me to have like a physical reaction. Art is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I can't even begin to articulate how much this movie means to me, like that a movie like this exists, that an artist can say, this is my experience in the world and I'm going to just put it out there. Once again, I'm not trans. I've never experienced what this film is metaphorically exploring, but I have felt this kind of identity crisis, not on a physical level, but definitely on an emotional level, feeling this kind of discomfort with myself, developing a relationship with art, and that's what I ultimately resonated with. This whole movie is spellbinding. It puts you in this daze where the world surrounding our main character feels completely tuned out. It forcibly drowns you in the world that Owen feels totally estranged from. Justice Smith embodies this like visible discomfort in his own skin so effectively. Bridget Lundy Payne is obviously the standout. They brought so much raw honesty to this character that could have very easily felt grandiloquent and manages to navigate so many complicated emotions in a very tactful way. I Saw the TV Glow. I'm gonna say it's the best movie of the year. And for a while I confidently said that this was my favorite, but I don't know. I've sat with it more and I can't deny it because my number one just barely inches it out. And this is just personal taste, but here it is. A Real Pain is not the most groundbreaking film I've seen, but it's 100% my thing. It scratched that itch for me. As a fan of the previously mentioned Richard Linklater, I was instantly entranced by this movie. Just spending time with these extremely layered human characters, being a fly on the wall, and just listening in on what they have to say was so engrossing to me. Seeing how David and Benji hurt one another, but also lift each other up in a weird way, it's all so beautiful to me. I'm sorry if I'm not putting this into words in the best way. I'm really bad at doing this. It's really hard for me to express how much this movie means to me personally. The writing is so alive, so authentic and rich, and it feels so in touch with the human heart and the human soul. I can't beat around the bush though. This film is really elevated by Kieran Culkin. Benji is probably my favorite character I've seen in a movie all year. He's funny, he's intuitive, he's charming, he's an asshole, he's sensitive, he's socially conscious, but also doesn't really respect social boundaries. He makes friends with everyone he meets, but he also makes people like really, really uncomfortable. He's one of the most erratic and complicated characters I've seen on screen in a long time. It's one of the best depictions of mental illness I've seen on screen. scene ever, to be honest. I owe so much of this to Kieran Culkin's performance. It broke me. It shattered my heart. It made me weep. It made me belly laugh. Like, so much of that is obviously on the page, and I really do want to give credit to Jesse Eisenberg because he really does tap into this like muddy, fleshy part of the soul. I honestly did not want this movie to end. I love these characters so deeply. Both of these men display a very ardent sense of vulnerability, working through different brackets of grief and finding a way to navigate and channel all of that pain in a very healthy way. I wanted the moments to breathe even longer. I didn't want to say goodbye. When it cut to black at the end, just like that final shot, like I sobbed. I like, it was a weird kind of sob, not the normal kind. Like, I felt like I was parting ways with a loved one. I don't know, maybe it's because I have such a close relationship with my cousins, even though they live on the other side of the country. I don't know, I mean, it could be that, but I really resonated with it. It really affected me emotionally. A Real Pain is a relatively easy watch. It's very restrained. It mostly relies completely on the writing and the performances. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but let Jesse Eisenberg make whatever he wants. A year ago, I would not have ever thought that a Jesse Eisenberg written, directed movie that he also starred in would be my favorite movie of the year. But it is, and it's so good. It's such a good film. This movie wasn't perfect, but to me it means the world. I love this movie, man. I love it so much. I'm really glad I'm here. I'm glad I was able to experience this journey. And yeah. And that's it. Sorry if this video was too long. I'm sorry that I was rambling a little bit, especially at the end. I wrote a script for this video, and then I kind of like went off script for a little bit. So I hope it makes sense and I communicated what I wanted to communicate. But thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, I hope to see you in another video whenever I make another video. I really enjoy doing them. I really enjoy talking about this stuff. And I hope in any way it spoke to you or you resonated with anything I had to say. That would mean the world to me if that's the case. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. This is Ethan Butler, and I'm out.